So in the software development industry, there's a traditional approach to software development which was used pretty widely anywhere from the 1960s all the way through today. There are still some companies and groups that use this approach. And that traditional approach was nicknamed the Waterfall approach. And Waterfall, that term came from actually an essay that was written by a guy named Walter Royce, where he described these various phases that software development goes through. Right? There's a phase where we're gathering requirements from users. And typically those requirements would be written down in some type of a document, like a marketing requirements document or a product requirements document. And then the waterfall part comes where that document is handed off to some other group who would take the document from there and do the next phase. Like they might take that and write an engineering specification. And then that would be handed off to the development team who would actually write the code to make that stuff work. And then that would be handed off to the next team, which would be the testers who would do the testing for that stuff and make sure that it actually matches the requirements and matches the specification. And then that would be handed off to another team who would deploy the code, whether that be on a CD or onto a website or anything like that. And then that would be handed off onto another team that would do support and operations for that stuff. And so the waterfall idea came from this passing down from one team to the next of really passing the baton, right? That approach assumes that we actually were going to be good at predicting, A, what's the right thing to put in that? B, can we build it? And is that the right way to build it? And C, how long are each of those phases going to take? So the challenge is that we were bad at all those things. It's inherently unpredictable what users are going to want until they're actually playing with it. It's very difficult to estimate how long things are going to take that we've never done before. We're really bad at actually remembering how long something took in the past, let alone predicting how long something's going to take in the future. And so what would happen is the further down the waterfall you were, the more time crunched you were. Because if the phase before you took a little bit more time than they had planned, well, now part of your schedule just got cut out. And since the phases at the end were around testing and documentation and deployment, those phases often got really squished, which led to software full of bugs or poorly tested or poorly documented. So there were some inherent problems with this waterfall process. And in the 90s, the ideas from this come from much earlier than that. But in the 90s, there were some approaches that were becoming popular that were an attempt to really fix some of these problems or address some of the problems that happen in a waterfall approach. And that group of approaches eventually was called the Agile approach to software development. The most popular Agile approach is Scrum. The surveys show that about 80% of people that say they do an Agile approach use Scrum or Scrum plus something else, right? So the whole idea of Scrum is you take that whole cycle of phase, and squash it into a couple of weeks. Do one little feature that you think is the most important feature, and do one little piece of it, and build it all the way to like a releasable version of that in 2 weeks, and show it to the users and say, what do you think about this? Did we get it right? You get the quality good within that 2 weeks, right? And so you make sure that the quality is high when you're showing it to them. You take that feedback and you say, okay, what would be the next most important thing we could do? And you go another 2 weeks, and you go another 2 weeks. And so Scrum is really built on the idea that we can't predict what people are going to want 2 years from now. We can't predict how long it's going to take to build that type of stuff with any level of accuracy. And so let's take a little piece at a time, build it, get some feedback on it, do another little piece, build it, get some feedback on it, do another little piece, and repeat that process. And you may do that for months at a time before you actually release something to the users. But doing it in those 2 week chunks gives you lots of opportunities to kind of course correct and to say, hey, this is taking longer than we expected, and so we're not going to get those last couple of features that were on our wish list for this release. So it ended up, the other thing it does is it blends those different roles onto a single team. Where you used to have a team of requirements gatherers and a team of developers and a team of testers, and it puts them all on a single small team together so that they're talking to each other instead of writing documents and handing them off to each other. And as we all know from reading internet forums or comment threads, writing is often not the best way to communicate. And when you actually put people face to face and have them talk to each other, we get much better communication out of that.